Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that there is a date for IDF troops to go into Rafah. IDF troops have been withdrawn from Gaza in recent weeks, and currently only a few hundred remain deployed along the key north-south highway in the enclave. With few troops in Gaza, a Rafah operation is not expected in the coming days. Prime Minister Netanyahu insisted yet again that a plan for a Rafah operation has been approved and that there is no victory over Hamas without an operation in the southern Gaza city.
הניצחון הזה מחייב כניסה לרפיח וחיסול גדודי הטרור שם. זה יקרה, יש תאריך.
Rafah is teeming with some 1.3 million displaced civilians. The IDF plan for a Rafah operation has been approved after discussions with the U.S. were held to devise means to avoid civilian casualties. The army awaits government orders to move forward. The Prime Minister referred to the mediated talks in Cairo.
קיבלתי היום דיווח מפורט על השיחות בקהיר. אנחנו פועלים כל הזמן להשגת מטרותינו, ובראשן שחרור כל חטופינו והשגת ניצחון מוחלט על חמאס.
Meanwhile, on day 186 of the war in Gaza, the Air Force remains quite active. Hamas rocket launching posts were struck after they were found embedded inside a humanitarian area in western Khan Yunis. The IDF confirmed the evacuation of civilians before fighter jets precisely struck the 3 rocket launching posts. Details have emerged about the potential mediated deal for the return of Israeli hostages held in Gaza. According to a Qatari-owned news outlet, the U.S. drafted proposal calls for an initial truce over the Eid al-Fitr holiday, followed by the release of 40 hostages over a 6-week period. ILTV's Rachel Safdie has been following developments in the hostage negotiations and joins us now in the studio. And by the way, you've been doing great reports. So what would you say is the progress so far?
Right, Steve. Well, there have been many conflicting reports on all sorts of, international media, Qatari media, Egyptian, American, and we should, set the record straight on what's actually going on. It's important to note that after last week, we heard about the phone call between President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu on Thursday. And after that call, we saw a lot of changes on the Israeli side. We actually saw throughout last week quite a big withdrawal, as you said, of troops from the Gaza Strip, leaving only 1 battalion. We saw a lot more humanitarian aid going in. This Sunday, actually, we saw 322 humanitarian aid trucks. That's the largest number of trucks we've had since the beginning of this war. We saw the approval for the Erez crossing opening and the Ashdod port, once again to helping in humanitarian aid. And reports do say that that's in correlation to the negotiations that are going on right now. Qatari's foreign minister has said that they're awaiting for both Israel and Hamas's response on this offer that's on the table, mediated by the U.S. And what we could be seeing is around 40 hostages being returned home.
So not all of them, a group of about 40?
A group of about 40 that specifically are in, the humanitarian side of it. We would be seeing, women, including female soldiers, the elderly, men over 50, and men under 50 that are in serious medical conditions.
Rachel, Egyptian sources are saying the proposal currently is being examined by Israel and Hamas. Will there be approval, at least on the Israeli side, as far as you can tell? And what are the main points that might be disagreed on?
Right, so it's important to note that there's 2 main points on Hamas' side that are important for them that Israel will compromise on, and there's one specific point of what Israel wants. So what Israel wants is 40 hostages. They're asking for 40 hostages, as I've said, that fit into this humanitarian description. That's females, that's the elderly, and men under 50 in very severe medical conditions. However, we've understood from Hamas member has said that they do not have 40 hostages that fit this humanitarian description that are alive.
All right, so we're going to have to pick it up again tomorrow, but it looks like things are moving. Rachel, thanks so much for being with us today.
Of course.
The United Nations Security Council president has referred the Palestinian Authority's application to become a full member of the world body to the Committee for the Admission of New Members. Israel denounced the move. ILTV's Devo Klein has the story.
The Palestinian Authority last week formally asked for renewed consideration by the Security Council of its 2011 application to become a full member of the world body. The Palestinians are a non-member observer state at the UN currently. The deliberation to consider Palestinian statehood is expected later this month.
It was sent to the Security Council through the Secretary General of the UN. It was a historic moment then, and now that historic moment has been revived again, and we sincerely hope, after 12 years since we changed our status to an observer state, that the Security Council will elevate itself to implementing the global consensus on the two-state solution by admitting the State of Palestine for full membership.
Israel's UN ambassador Gilad Erdan said that a Palestinian state would be a threat to Israel's national security.
Granting the Palestinian statehood is not only a blatant violation of the UN Charter, it also violates the fundamental principle that everyone can understand of reaching a solution, a lasting solution at the negotiating table. There is nothing that perpetuates a conflict more than one side believing that they can force their demands on the other side through a third party. And this is exactly what the UN's discussion to unilaterally grant the Palestinians a state does. It perpetuates the conflict. From even before the UN was established, the Arabs refused to accept the notion of a Jewish state in any borders, here in 1947 and since.
Erdan said that Palestinian rejection of peace is the reason for the impasse, and negotiations were needed and not unilateral hostile moves.
Each time a peace plan was tabled, the Palestinians' response was to reject it outright. To the Palestinians, the only solution is a solution where the Jewish state ceases to exist. This is not how you resolve a conflict. This is how you ensure more bloodshed, more violence, and many more October 7th. An agreement can be agreed upon only at the negotiating table, not by forcing it unilaterally here in New York. The UN has been sabotaging peace in the Middle East for years, but today marks the beginning of a point of no return.
The potential hostage deal for an extended ceasefire is causing political ripples. Well, joining us to discuss is JNS Jerusalem Bureau Chief Alex Trayman. Alex, good to see you as always. You got your jacket on?
Steve.
All right, we're on the air now.
Thanks, Steve.
Minister Ben-Gvir is threatening to bring down the government over the potential hostage deal. Is that a serious threat?
Well, he's been doing that really since the beginning of the war, threatening Netanyahu that if the war is not carried out in the most aggressive fashion, that he could pull down the government. And of course, Netanyahu is beholden to his right-wing and religious coalition partners to do that. I think if there is a real deal on the table to get the hostages back, that Ben-Gvir might come off his position, as he's done several times before.
Prime Minister Netanyahu keeps talking about complete victory in Gaza, while senior officials, including Defense Minister Gallant, are saying that a hostage deal is the most important thing right now. Where does most of the war cabinet stand, and where does the cabinet stand on the issue? What are your thoughts? I mean, what's the most important thing right now as far as the government's concerned?
Netanyahu has been balancing these two goals. Number one, of trying to have a complete victory over Hamas, which basically means that Hamas no longer governs in the Strip, in addition to no longer being a military entity. Of course, there's tremendous domestic pressure to get back the hostages, and you see already that there's protests in the streets. And now that the hostage movement seems to be merging together with the anti-Netanyahu, anti-government movement along the lines of the protests that we saw last summer against judicial reform. So Netanyahu has got to figure out how to walk this tightrope between the right-wing members of his government that want to see total victory be the number one war goal, and these domestic forces that are willing to get out in the streets that want the hostages back. I think Netanyahu would like to shoot the moon and try to get both done if he can.
Well, Alex, there are very few troops on the ground now in Gaza. We are certainly not currently conducting maneuvers that will lead toward victory. Maybe the political messaging needs to change. What does total victory in Gaza even mean at this point?
Well, what the prime minister and other members of the war cabinet, like Ron Dermer, have told me is that if they would get to some kind of a deal that would get the hostages back, and they would look for such a deal that might actually give the opportunity for Hamas's leadership to go into exile and to declare an end of the immediate conflict. So there would be a way of potentially trying to get both. But the prime minister even last night said that the IDF absolutely will go into Rafah and that there's even a date set for that. What will happen before then? Well, the IDF and the Netanyahu are committed to move the civilian population out of Rafah before that operation occurs. That's something that will probably take weeks to happen. And if it does, also you can be sure that Netanyahu wants to be on the same page with the United States as to what the humanitarian efforts for that civilian move, what those details look like. So I think that Netanyahu is certainly pulling back troops. That shows that Israel stepping back, trying to give time and space for a hostage deal to be signed, but that they do intend to go ahead and to finish that job and go into Rafah and defeat the rest of the Hamas battalions.
Just turning to the other hot political issue, the ultra-Orthodox draft issue, already weighing heavily on the coalition. And after War Cabinet Minister Gantz called for elections in September, are we witnessing possibly the beginning of the end of this government?
Well, as you mentioned before, and the threats of Ben Gvir, Gantz can pull out of the government, and the government can technically survive that. They were a coalition of 64 members before Gantz came in with his coalition partners. Gantz can leave, and the coalition still has 64 members. The Haredi issue is a big domestic issue, but it's probably not the issue that's going to push the Haredim out of the government, because they know that the pressure for the Haredim to join the military is not coming from Netanyahu. It's not coming from the coalition. It's coming from outside forces that wouldn't necessarily benefit the Haredim to go towards. So they probably will glue themselves to Netanyahu, even if they don't like this pressure from the court and this pressure from the domestic opposition. But what will happen if Benny Gantz does leave the government is that within those opposition forces and within the United States, you might see less legitimacy than you currently have for the existing government. You might see protest movement continuing to grow, similar to what we saw last summer before the war started.
Sorry, we're going to have to leave it there, but I think the point was made. Thanks so much, and great to see you again, Alex.
Thanks, Steve.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
For the first time, an IDF ship mounted with Iron Dome missiles shot down an enemy target. The ship's mounted version of the Iron Dome missile defense system intercepted an apparent drone that entered Israeli airspace near Eilat shortly before midnight. The suspected drone was taken out by Sea Dome, deployed on the Navy's advanced SAR-6C class corvettes. The target had flown in from the eastern direction, from where Iranian-backed militias have fired at Israel repeatedly since the start of the war in Gaza. It was declared operational in November 2022. Drone infiltration sirens sounded in Eilat. The IDF said that the Navy tracked the target before successfully shooting it down, with the Sea Dome system marking its first operational use. There were no reports of damages or injuries in the incident. Eilat residents filmed the moment of the interception over the southern city. Clips posted to social media showed 2 interceptor missiles being launched from the sea. Iran-backed groups, including Yemen's Houthis, the Islamic Resistance of Iraq, and a group in Syria linked to Lebanon's Hezbollah, have targeted Eilat numerous times since October 7th. The Sea Dome, much like the ground version of the Iron Dome, is capable of downing rockets, cruise missiles, and drones. The Navy's SAR-6 class corvettes are normally tasked with guarding the natural gas platforms off Israel's coast, as well as shipping lanes. Pope Francis has called Hamas evil and bad guys. The comments emerged from a meeting in the Vatican between Francis and family members of hostages taken during the October 7th attack. The Pope vowed to continue working to bring the hostages home. More from ILTV's William Sharon.
The one-hour meeting of the delegation of hostage families with Pope Francis was held to mark 6 months since the Hamas massacre and the assault on Israeli communities around Gaza, in which more than 250 people were abducted as hostages.
Generally, for the most part, we all came out of the meeting with the Pope very emotional. It was a very powerful meeting for us. He was very clear about his solidarity for the release of the hostages. He also told us that he is in contact, obviously, with the Catholic Church in Gaza and how they have told him and shared with him about the hostages and about the terror tunnels and about the theft of humanitarian aid in Gaza, and that he is working in his own channels to help with releasing the hostages, and that he is committed to it.
Those attending the meeting said that the pontiff had very harsh words for Hamas.
And he called Hamas evil, which they are.
He called Hamas even.
Evil. He called them bad guys and evil. And he was very clear that the hostages need to come home. I think, we can all agree. He was very, very warm. And for the most part, we couldn't believe how much time he gave to us and how warm and welcoming he was.
It's a difficult time for Israelis, including a large number of poor who are having a hard time making ends meet. And on top of it all, the Passover holiday is coming, and many thousands of new poor need help because of the impact of the war, including evacuees who lost their jobs and incomes, and women whose husbands are in extended IDF reserve service. The organization that year after year comes to the aid of the most needing basic and holiday foods is Yad Ezra Vula.
62,000 food baskets and vouchers have been requested for Passover. That means fruits and vegetables, chickens, boxes of matzah, oil, canned goods, and food vouchers. With your help, young orphans won't go hungry. Their only hope is you. They turn to us. We turn to you. Help us feed over 300,000 people for Passover. Looking ahead, what will happen in the north? The Israeli government has instructed all citizens to prepare for an all-out war. Our 14 trucks will be able to deliver food to anyone in bomb shelters across the country. Let's make sure everyone has food to survive this crisis. Please, open your hearts to your brothers and sisters in Israel. Facing this looming threat, Yad Ezra Vula remains committed to feeding Israel, ensuring that no one is left behind during these very difficult times. Together with your support, we can continue to make a difference in the lives of those who need it most. We are all soldiers in this war against the Jewish people. Help us win this war.
Well, with the impending threat of war on Israel's northern border and the government's recommendation to prepare for such an escalation, citizens of northern Israel are left unprovided for. With the Passover holiday approaching, thousands of people impacted by the war have no means to celebrate. Yad Ezra Vula have set out to provide much-needed food and supplies to the evacuated and displaced citizens. And today, they have a new and unexpected public advocate. Well, joining us now is best-selling kosher cookbook author, celebrity chef, television producer, and businesswoman, Jamie Geller. Hi, Jamie. This could be the first time you're ever on ILTV when we're not asking you about your recipes. Apologies to viewers. As you understand it, how big is the problem of basic food needs in Israel?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. And this is a recipe to feed those that are hungry and those that are needy. It's very much a challenge right now. It always has been. On any given Passover, as we are here at the eve of this big holiday, Yad Ezra Vula usually gives out 50,000 food baskets. This year, the need is 62,000. So in addition to the holiday, obviously, Israel is at war. We have evacuees, we have widows, we have orphans, we have families whose sole breadwinner has gone back to reserves to fight in Gaza. It is such a challenging time now. And there's a lot of what we call new poor. And so in addition to those that are living below the poverty line prior to October 7th, so many now have lost their jobs. Industries have closed because of men going into reserves, because of the economic situation, because of the need to evacuate the South, the North. And so the situation is quite dire. We need everyone here, all of the friends of Israel, to stand with us. Please, everyone, to purchase a food basket to give to a family in need. Yad Ezra Vula is feeding over 300,000 people from 15 distribution centers. Yad Ezra Vula is feeding over 300,000 people from 93 distribution centers across the country, and with 15 trucks and 4 warehouses, including a warehouse now that's been erected, an emergency warehouse in the north.
Well, what's the game plan for the coming Passover holiday period? Will the organization try to reach everywhere in the country?
Well, Yad Ezra Vula is the biggest supplier of food security and food baskets in all of Israel. And the goal is to reach anyone and everyone, but we can only do that with our friends and our partners' support. So as I said, we have 93 distribution facilities and 15 trucks. There's nowhere in Israel that we cannot reach. But in addition to Passover coming up, which we know is the added expenses of any holiday, and of course, we want to give joy to everyone, no matter what their economic situation is, and all of the vulnerable populations we're talking about, Holocaust survivors, elderly, widows, orphans, like I said, those that are living below the poverty line on a regular basis. Now there is a threat of impending war in the north. So the government has actually told those that have not been completely evacuated from the north to go ahead and stock up on food, water, and batteries. They're expecting potential power outages and long stays in bomb shelters. As we have done in this war to date, and as we've done in previous wars, Yad Ezra Vula makes sure that every single truck gets to every single area, even to civilians who are in sheltering for extended periods of time in bomb shelters. But again, we can only do this with your help. And with your help and God's help, we will, in fact, be able to feed everyone here in Israel.
Well, Jamie, what was your motivation for getting involved in this cause, and how can our viewers help?
First of all, I'm so happy that you asked that. You mentioned at the beginning, obviously, my background in food and cookbook authors. What a luxury it is for us to be planning now for the Passover Seder. The Passover Seder is the single most celebrated tradition, more than fasting on Yom Kippur, more than lighting Shabbat candles, for all Jewish people all over the world. And we have this luxury of planning the Seder, getting together with families and friends, thinking about what we're going to make on the menu, how many desserts we can make. Imagine those that are not even sure they can put food on the table. So that really is what speaks to my heart and soul. And also for me and Yad Ezra Vula, when we see children, I've been to the children's centers where we're feeding children hot lunches that they otherwise would not receive if not for Yad Ezra Vula and your support. And how can we say no to a hungry child? How can we say no to a widow? How can we say no to someone whose husband is fighting in Gaza right now? The breadwinner is at war and she will be alone for Passover with her children. How can we say no to the evacuee from the north who is now displaced with his family and has been let go of his job because of the situation and, like I said, the economy and the war in Israel? And so that is what speaks to my heart. I know that's what speaks to so many. The number one thing you can do, I know that you're going to be putting up the link here, buy a food basket for Passover, buy more than one, support and give food to those here that need it in Israel. It is so easy. It's just a click of a button.
Buy a food basket. Jamie Geller, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Mostly cloudy skies and light rain are expected tonight around the country, with temperatures reaching lows of 13 Celsius or 56 degrees Fahrenheit. And then tomorrow, we should be seeing more sporadic showers and cool temperatures, reaching highs of 20 degrees Celsius or 69 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, that's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel and all of your devices, check out our ILTV channels, subscribe to the ILTV newsletter, and check out our website, iltv.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Steve Leibowitz. Let's win the war and bring them home.